Okay, this is the part that we actually saw before, and what they're doing is they're trying to identify who is infected and who isn't. If you are infected, you go to that farm that they send old dogs to, and that's what they're going to do with this young lady here. They find out she's infected, and sure enough, they're going to inject her with not a antidote, but a euthanasia.
I think it's interesting that the only two people in this situation are wearing any personal protective equipment. Everyone else is just breathing freely in their regular clothes. Of course, when they shoot somebody, if they're infected, that's probably going to spread it. I've done some containment for diseases over the years and trying to test people. So I have to put on the guard, but everyone does. And you go in, you sanitize everything that comes out, but just to have it out in the open there is probably spreading more of it.
Well, here they're caught by the authorities, and they're using their Star Trek tricorder to identify who's infected and who's not. Ellie here, who is our hero, stabs the guy in the side of the knee, which of course could tear ligaments and sure enough make him easy to drop. Boom, he's dead.
Bold move. So we have the reveal here that she is positive, so it was long enough to see that she's a carrier, right?
So she's got to save humanity by becoming a lab rat,
old.
essentially, for some mad scientists, it seems.
So that's pretty cool. This has also happened in a few other zombie type movies. And yeah, I said zombies. I know people are like, it's a fungus, they're infected, but
it's like shingles.
Same difference. Where you have somebody who is infected but doesn't turn so quickly. So it kind of puts the high stakes. But this also means that there has to be some sort of organization somewhere that can put that to benefit, put that to good use. Otherwise, it's all just a hope. And maybe at the end of this, they find out there's no lab anywhere that could help them out.
Well, this is Bill's town, and basically it's essentially a neighborhood that is surrounded by an enclosure.
That sounds nice.
Has been put together essentially by one guy named Bill. It's surprising that they haven't gone through Bill's booby traps. There's a bunch that he put out there and catches all sorts of infected and other kinds of bad guys like raiders. But right now it looks like it's pretty empty here.
Did they close the gate behind them? That's what I'm wondering.
Exactly right. They did not, and we might find out later on if that was a good idea or not. He's looking for a vehicle because they have a long way to go. In the game, they're starting off in Boston and have to make their way west. And this is something that I think people should realize that, in a real post-apocalyptic setting, there's going to be a lot of abandoned houses. People left quickly, or there you see a suitcase that wasn't even completely filled. And there's going to be items that you can use. There are going to be clothes. There may be a bed to sleep on for the night if the original owners aren't there. And a lot of other items that just were just too much to carry. And of course, the owner could be an infected and still be in the house. That's always a possibility.
One other thing you have to consider when an area is abandoned is that the pests come and take over. When humans are there and they've got their pets and everything happening, it keeps rodents and animals away. But if they leave, you could have rats and mice everywhere, insects, especially if there's any food for them to eat.
Well, it looks like we got caught in a booby trap, and there's no rule that says that things can go wrong in pairs or trios. And in this case, it looks as if we wound up not finding a car yet and having Joel hanging upside down. By the way, you can't possibly die hanging upside down. There's stress on your heart and stress on your lungs, pressure on your lungs, and of course there are infected that might eat you. And Bill is not that friendly. And the reason why he's not that friendly is because they just had an encounter with the infected, and one of these guys could be bitten. And if that's the case, they turn within 2 days, except apparently for Ellie here, who's a pretty spunky kid.
She's pretty much showed the most gumption. I'm enthralled by the story at this point.
He's basically upgrading his weaponry, but what I think people need to realize, that a lot of people don't, is that you really have to spend a lot of time cleaning your weapon. After shooting it just really not that many times, there's carbon residue and all sorts of other residue that winds up in your weapon, in the chamber, in the barrel, in the action. And these areas have to be cleaned out. You have to remove the residue. Sometimes you have to lubricate some of the parts. And if you don't do that, then you wind up having a gun that is not reliable. It could jam on you at the worst time. And so it's very important to really make every effort to keep every item that you have, that especially your weapons, in tip-top shape.
Yeah, any piece of gear or equipment that you have needs to be maintained really well. So a gun makes itself dirty by firing it. All of the carbon, like you said. So make sure you know how to assemble, disassemble, clean, and use your weapon.
And some of these weapons takes actual skill to take apart. Now, there are some very simple weapons, like some of these Glock handguns that you see that are very easy to take apart. They're like 4 or 5 parts to them in total. And some of them are actually relatively complex, especially certain rifles. All right, well, he's foraging, collecting the stuff that he needs, and here is the vehicle. What do you think, Nat, about the quality of the gas in this 20-year-old vehicle?
It's going to be trash. And everything in the engine's going to be jammed, blocked up. Again, any piece of gear or equipment you have, you need to maintain, and that includes your vehicle. The tires are probably shot.
Yeah, and you even mentioned rats. You know, rats are very happy making their nests in the engine and chewing on the wires and the pumps and things like that.
You can only really push start a manual transmission, so it's got to be a stick shift.
Yes, it is a stick shift. Yeah. I was just saying that it's pretty impressive because there you have a 12-year-old that's driving a stick shift there.
Yeah. But she's pretty capable. She's shown that. So when you're jump starting a vehicle, you get it rolling, you have the clutch in, and you have it in gear, and then usually like second gear, you pop the clutch, just let it go, and then it turns the engine over. So this is what modern day Pittsburgh looks like. Let's see if they show it in post-apocalyptic form.
This is where a lot of people wind up getting in trouble, thinking that somebody is injured when they might not be injured. Sometimes groups of raiders may use a female or children as bait to get you to stop to try to help somebody that seems sick or ill or injured, and wind up being attacked by these guys instead.
And in a situation like this, an injury could mean infection. Also, if you're in a very congested, crowded area and the road has been cleared, then you can assume that somebody cleared it, and it's probably a protected route, maybe leading you into a choke point.
You see some other guys, and we have to identify them as being part of the raider group. Indeed, they actually are. They were trying to shoot at some crows, and one of them was being jived at for missing them. But believe it or not, you can eat crow if you really had to. It has about 100 calories, about 1 gram of fat, and 20 grams of protein.
Isn't there a phrase, something about eating crow?
Eating crow, yes. And it's not something you want to do because it's not tasty, but they did eat it during the Depression, and they still eat it in places like Lithuania. I think that says, stop feeding us dogs. The dogs are painted out, but that's what I think they actually said there.
It's an interesting thing in a post-apocalyptic world, because the things that we see as our history or even our day-to-day lives suddenly become nothing. And here you get a little piece of history, somebody's military record. If we saw a journal like that from the Civil War or Revolutionary War, World War II, any of those, that would be a piece of history. And now it's just a piece of trash. There's no civilization that values history.
And this civilization doesn't value life. Here are 2 people that were not carrying even a backpack and were found worthy to kill simply because they might have something in their pockets that might be useful to these 2 guys that were part of the raider group. But the point of the matter is it wasn't worth the bullets. The bullets were probably worth more than killing these people. If
people became like that, or if the people who were like that already rose to the top of the scum pile, scum floating on the pond. Well,
they'll be the most aggressive, so that's what I think, at least in the early going, would happen, is that these people would be in charge for at least a period of time. They have a tank? Is that what that was?
There was a turret on some sort of vehicle. I really like the overgrowth of the plants here. We really have no idea how much our day-to-day traffic, footpath, vehicles, everything else keeps plants from taking over. If all the vehicles stopped and people weren't everywhere, plants would be growing everywhere. They'd be growing out of every crack in the sidewalk.
Right. You can't keep Mother Nature down. These are 2 characters that you'll also see in the HBO show, Henry and his brother Sam.
Oh, it's a tough situation. Again, you see these kids who are pretty capable of things that they, in a regular world, shouldn't even understand.
Well, there are children soldiers in parts of Africa as well that would shoot you without any reluctance at all, and that's just the nature of the society.
That goes back to the concept of disasters or post-apocalyptic scenarios being something that we could face, even if it's temporary. So parts of the world that are dealing with complete disruptions of society, of the basic necessities, are essentially living in a post-apocalyptic scenario. And when we have a disaster, it's what some people call their personal apocalypse. And even if it's temporary, you lose your touch with the outside world, all of your basic necessities. You're down to survival mode. And generally people work together, but occasionally you're going to get some people who take advantage of the situation. Even though we're looking at this from our screens in a comfortable world, there are parts of the world that are dealing with this, and I mean, not this specifically, but dealing with really difficult situations. And in an emergency or disaster, you lose all of that and you're put in a survival situation, which makes you really wonder, makes you think about the ethics of it all, because ultimately it's all temporary. This is 20 years, but in a disaster, does that mean you can go and take anything you want from a store or from another person? In this situation, it's a prolonged event, but one day it's going to be history, and you're looking back and who were the good guys and who were the bad guys.
Well, Sam here, or Henry here, the older brother, is very, I guess he has a lot of morality, or he has a lot of scruples, because he didn't let his brother take that toy, even though he had a backpack that was half empty. I think that is a problem, because you're going to have to deal with anxiety and depression just as often as you're going to wind up dealing with gunfights at the OK Corral. At least I hope so. It really wouldn't have hurt, and might have helped if that child was able to take that toy. Now here, I don't know, it doesn't seem to me that these infected are going directly after Joel here, but he's wasting his ammunition shooting them. And I'm not sure why.
It might just be an innate drive to rid the world of all of that.
Well, the problem is that he ran out of ammo and he didn't even take the rifle that he had. He's there with he has a rifle. I guess they left the rifle. Was that a different rifle? I don't know. He's got a rifle on his back, but he obviously left it as he walked away from it. Yes. So apparently Sam was sleeping in another room, so nobody knows that he is infected.
On the point of dehumanizing an enemy, I do want to make a caveat. An enemy will often dehumanize themselves by their actions. So if you are fighting for a purpose or a cause or for justice, and your enemy is doing something terrible, then they've dehumanized themselves enough. And that's, I think, it's justified.
Well, here Joel is trying to save Ellie, but Henry just can't, well, I guess he can kill his brother.
Right, and I think he had to be the one to do it in that situation. He seems it's this responsibility he has, but that kind of toll to your psyche. In a situation like this, when you're in survival mode, there's so much emotional trauma and emotional toll on everything. And then you escalate that by the loss of a family member. You have to take care of your own mental health and emotional well-being so that you have something to draw on in an emergency and disaster situation.
Now here, they find Joel's brother Tommy, who they've been looking for quite a long time. And this, I think, is more realistic. I mean, 20 years down the road, the people are going to be riding horses more than driving cars. Nobody's going to be making new cars or parts or the gas or refining oil probably for gas. So you're going to be riding horses. The only problem is there's just not going to be enough horses. It probably would take several generations to breed enough horses so that every survivor can actually have one.
Right. When we lose a modern convenience, we don't go back to the thing it replaced because that thing is obsolete. We go back to before the thing it replaced. So if we lose cars, we don't go back to horses. There aren't enough horses. There aren't wagons. We don't have enough people who can maintain them. We go back to walking.
Here's where the lab is supposed to be that they're supposed to take Ellie to. I'd like to say a little bit about horses for a second. Very few of us have any real experience taking care of a horse, but these things, require some maintenance. I mean, they eat about 2% of their body weight a day. They have to forage constantly because their digestive system is fragile. Their stomach is small, so they can't eat too much at once, so they just sort of nibble and graze throughout the day. And they drink about 8 gallons of water a day, too. So If you don't have that water supply and you don't, feed your horse enough, there are going to be a lot of people, inexperienced people, they're going to, even if they get a horse, they're going to wind up having it break down because they just didn't know how to take care of it.
Oh, there he goes.
Oh!
Ooh.
Well,
so what do you think they got there?
That's bad. That's very, very bad. You've got some rebar that has impaled his abdomen, but not in the love handle area that all the action heroes wind up getting injured in.
Right, that's like
shake it off.
His liver or something.
Right, it's right in the middle of his abdomen, and so for sure, it's gone through muscle, it's gone through bone, it might have gone through vertebra or his pelvis, liver, intestines. There's probably holes in his intestine. This is a very, very big thing. He probably shouldn't survive this.
She starts taking his flashlight and picking through his pockets.
Yeah. See, in normal times, you would probably not remove something impaled in someone because it may be tamponading or slowing the bleeding from the blood vessels nearby that have been compromised.
It looks like the entry was below the backpack and then went up through a few things into a little bit higher in the front. But man, that is going to be a mess. A lot of infection, a lot of blood loss. He stood up pretty easily just now, and there's probably a lot of back muscles disrupted right now. That's
the kind of wound that you sort of drape him over the saddle instead of having him sit down. We haven't even talked about the blood vessels that probably have been severed.
Well, he's feeling it now.
And of course, how is she going to move this poor guy? Look, a cute bunny. Oh.
It looks like she's carrying the bow he was carrying previously.
Now she found some real meat.
She can do that 100-yard headshot. That deer can go a long way after it's been hit, especially with a primitive bow or recurve bow. Something like compound bow could go through a deer.
This is too long, too far away to go away from the horse. And these guys are indeed cannibals.
Oh, look at that. They just wasted a lot of good meat throwing it on the ground.
Yeah, you could certainly eat that. Well, I mean, they probably don't worry too much about food preparation. They're eating human beings.
That's just disgusting. The cannibalism. It's not really sustainable.
Right. Now, interestingly enough, they gave her some food, but the question was that human food or was it the deer meat?
She asked if that was what was in it, and he says it's deer. And
well, but the sauce might have been human.
Yeah, it's just disgusting. It's horrifying.
What a compelling storyline. I loved The Last of Us. Definitely check me out at doomandbloom.net, where you'll find all sorts of articles, podcasts, and videos on medical preparedness.
You could visit me on Instagram at The Preparedness Guy.